I have $200 million in the bank, but I would give every single cent to go back to being the poor mechanic who held my daughter's hand. The world calls me the retail king, a business genius, a symbol of success. But when I get home, and the only thing waiting for me is the echo of my own footsteps, I remember that, in reality, I am just an old man who traded his daughter for spreadsheets, flights, and the applause of strangers. It all started with a lie I told myself. I'm doing this for her. Back then, I was a mechanic, covered in grease, with overdue rent and a nearly empty fridge. My daughter, Julia, was 5 years old, always dancing around the house in her little pink ballet tutu. One day, she jumped into my lap, looked me in the eyes, and asked if I was coming to her performance. I told her of course I would, that the seat with my name on it would be the loudest in the audience. That same day, the opportunity for my first big contract appeared. I looked at the clock, I looked at the contract, and I told myself, it's just today. I'll miss today so I never have to miss anything in her future again. I signed it. I left with the feeling that the world had finally noticed me. When I got home late with a giant doll in the trunk, she was already in her pajamas, her makeup smudged and her tutu put away. She smiled when she saw the gift, but the spark in her eyes wasn't joy. It was the look of someone who had sat in front of an empty chair. The years passed, and that excuse, I'm doing it for her, became my shield for every absence. The business grew. The little shop became a chain. The chain became a corporation. The corporation became an empire. I said I was building a future for the family, but in reality, I was building a monument to my own ego. When Julia was 10, I called her on speakerphone from an airport during her birthday party. Everyone was singing, and I, from the other side of the world, asked her to make a wish. She made one, but she wouldn't tell me what it was. Today I know, her wish was for me to be there, by her side, holding her plate of cake. When she was 15, she came to my home office door, looking small, asking for 10 minutes to talk about a boy at school. I was buried in charts, projecting numbers. I barely looked up. I told her her father was building the future, and that she could talk to her mother about it. She stood in silence for a few seconds, as if choosing between insisting or giving up. She chose to give up. She turned around and walked out. I went back to my computer, satisfied with myself for being such a busy man. At 22, it was her college graduation. She messaged me, called me, sent photos of the invitation. I was in Tokyo, presenting the international expansion of my company. I stood on a stage and received a standing ovation from investors who could barely pronounce my last name. I spoke about growth, vision, and legacy. Meanwhile, on another stage, my daughter received her diploma and searched the crowd for a face that wasn't there. To compensate, I had a sports car with a red ribbon delivered to her house. I thought she'd be proud. Instead, she left the keys on the table with a note. I just wanted you to see me graduate. I didn't reply to the note. I tucked it in a drawer and convinced myself she would get over it. The final crack came years later. She walked into my office as an adult, firm, with a strange peace on her face. She said she was marrying a teacher, a simple man. My businessman brain screamed louder than anything else. I started talking about status, opportunities, and how she deserved someone at her level. While I talked about money, she talked about being heard, being loved, being seen. Since I couldn't understand that, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I pulled out my checkbook. I wrote an absurd amount, put it in front of her, and told her I'd give her $1 million to call off the wedding. I thought I was offering security. In reality, I was trying to buy her life once again. She looked at the check like it was a stranger. There was no anger in her eyes, only pity. And then she said the phrase that broke me forever. You are so rich that all you have is money. She tore the check in silence into calm pieces. She stood up and walked to the door. Desperate and proud, I yelled that if she walked out, she didn't need to come back. She didn't argue. She just replied, without looking back, that I had walked out of her life long before that day. The door closed. I sat there, surrounded by awards and framed contracts, feeling a void that no business deal had ever prepared me for. The following years were silent. I saw photos of her on social media from a distance. I knew she married the teacher. I knew she had children. Sometimes I would open our chat and stare at the empty text field, lacking the courage to write. Pride whispered that she should come to me. Loneliness screamed that I should be the one to kneel and ask for forgiveness. But I left it for later, always for later.
The schedule was full, the company was growing, and the wall between me and the only person who mattered grew with it. Until yesterday, the phone rang differently. An unknown number. A serious professional voice asked if I was Julia's father. My heart raced. I said yes. The voice belonged to a nurse. She said my daughter had suffered an aneurysm and asked if I could come. In that moment, every meeting, every deadline, every goal turned to dust. I drove like a madman. I, who always negotiated everything with calm, crossed the city as if trying to negotiate with time itself. At every red line, a flash. Little Julia in her pink tutu, the teenager at my office door, the graduate, her tearing the check. For the first time, I didn't feel big. I felt smaller than all the mistakes I had made. When I got to the hospital, the world smelled like disinfectant and urgency. A nurse recognized my name. Before she even spoke, I knew. She took me to a private room and told me with all the kindness in the world that Julia didn't make it, that they tried everything. It was fast. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The man who commanded hundreds of employees couldn't form a simple sentence. I want to see my daughter. The nurse handed me a small bag with her belongings, a worn wallet, some crumpled bills, a simple lipstick, an old keychain, and a small wrinkled photo. When I turned the photo over, my hands began to shake. It was me, decades ago, covered in grease, smiling, holding Julia as a baby. On the back, in her childhood handwriting, were 4 words that tore my chest apart. Daddy, my hero. In that instant, the entire narrative I had created about myself collapsed. I wasn't the hero. I was the villain of my own family story. She could have kept photos of her wedding, her kids, her new life. But what she carried in her wallet until her last day was the memory of a poor, tired, but present father. The mechanic who held her hand, not the tycoon who traded that hand for international contracts. The photo she chose didn't have a suit, an expensive watch, or a trophy. It had grease, sweat, and a smile I forgot how to use after the money came. Today I walk through this 20-room mansion, and every room echoes her name. I sit at the massive empty table, look at my $80,000 watch, and realize it never marked the time that actually mattered. I look at the high walls I built to protect my wealth, and I understand that while I was shielding my assets, I left my daughter's heart unprotected. If you are hearing my voice right now, don't do what I did. Don't wait for a hospital phone call to discover you missed your chance to be a father, a mother, a son, a spouse. Don't hide behind the phrase, "I'm doing this for the family," if you are actually using the family as an excuse to feed your own ego. Work is important, money is necessary, dreams are legitimate. But no contract is worth more than being present. No goal justifies an empty chair at the party of someone who loves you. I am 76 years old and I have $200 million in the bank. I have companies, real estate, investments, and fame. But I don't have the chance to hear my daughter say "Dad" ever again. If someone is waiting for you at home today, put down the phone, close the computer, and say no to that overtime that won't change your soul, only your bank account. Hug that person as if it were the last time, because one day it will be, and you won't get a warning. The empire you are building will eventually change owners. The money will pass from hand to hand, but time only moves in one direction. And when it decides to close a door, all the millions in the world cannot open it again.